Okay, so till now we have built the entire front end part. Now we will move on to the backend part. In backend part, we will write the entire web application logic. Okay, so I have created this Flask web app.py file. Here we will write the entire logic for the web application. So first thing is we need to import few models. So from Flask library, we are going to use Flask, render template, session, redirect and URL for these are the models that we need to import. Now Flask is to create a Flask web application. Render template will render the HTML pages. Last time in the API also we have used Flask library, but we have not created any HTML file. That's why we did not require this render template module. But in this case, we are going to render the HTML pages. Session is basically used to store the data on the session level. For example, if one particular website is used by multiple people, then there is a chances that if multiple people are using the same website, then in that case one variable can be used by multiple people. So to add that uniqueness based on the each user, we need to use session. So session will be unique for each particular person, so that one variable will contain multiple values in multiple sessions. Redirect is used from redirecting from one point to another point. In this case, point is nothing but our endpoint. URL for inside this URL for we will mention the endpoint. Then I have also created one helper functions.py file to declare the code which are used most of the time. So reusable code you can write inside the util files. Also you can create a helper functions like this. So let's go to the helper function first to identify the code. So inside the helper functions, you can see I'm importing some libraries like joblib, numpy, logging, also pickle. Now here you can see import pickle is in gray color. That means in this entire package, we are not using any pickle library. So let's remove this part. Then joblib, numpy, logging, Flask, WTF, then WTF forms, string field, radio field, text area field, submit field. So similarly in Gradio and Streamlit also, we have imported radio field, text field, input field to take input from the user data. And then validators. So validator is basically used to validate whether the user has inserted the data in that particular field or not. So that's why we are going to use validator. So a basic logging for the web application. Then inside the try path, I have mentioned the model path, scalar paths, and then reading that particular data from directly to joblib. So what we can do here, we have already created model and scalar path. So if you go to config.py, we have model path and scalar path. So in web app, we don't need to declare this thing again. So let's go to helper function and remove this part and import config. From config, import star and replace this model path with capital variable model path, scalar path with capital variable. Okay. Now here I am using try and except. So this is a good practice to write code, because whenever you write such kind of code, it can handle the error part like exception part. So try exception is basically used to handle the error and exception in the code. So you can understand in this way, whatever the code that you want to write or you want to work, you can write that code inside the try block. And let's say if anything goes wrong inside this particular part, then exception part will trigger. So to run the code, I am using try block, but if anything goes wrong, we will go to this particular path. Okay. So in try block, first I will load the sleep model and scalar model. And then using logging, we will log the message that model and scalar loaded successfully. Then let's say if any error is present in this particular code, it will go to the exception part. It will raise the error in the logging module, that error loading in this particular file. So it can be anything. The file is not present, or maybe the file is corrupted or something like that. then it will directly sleep model and scalar model will be converted to none, and then it will not work further beyond. So to handle that exception, you can use try and except part if anything goes wrong with the model. Then next is return prediction. So this return prediction function is nothing but our inference pipeline. So last time we did not use try and except, but in this particular part, we are going to use that. So try again to handle the main code, we can use try block, and if anything goes wrong with that try block, you can go to the exception part. So first thing we are going to do is, once we get the data, we will extract all the values and we will convert that into a list. Then we will convert that into an array and then transform that array into scaled one. And then it will return the prediction, and we will use that prediction values on label to return the index. If anything goes wrong in this part, then we will jump to the exception part and we will return the error. Okay, so this is the inference pipeline. Now next thing is Flask form. So sleep form is the custom class that we are declaring, and we are inheriting Flask form which is inbuilt. So we want some Flask form property. That's why we are inheriting this Flask form inside the sleep form. So inside the sleep form, we will mention the input parameter like enter the full name. Then here I'm using validator data required. So it will check whether the username is entered or not. If it is not, then it will not move forward for the submit button. So string field, age, gender, occupation, sleep duration, quality of sleep, physical activity, stress level, all the values we are going to take as an input. And then we will click on submit button. So once the user click on submit button, this data will go to the backend. So this Flask form we need to take the data from the HTML page. This inference pipeline we need to return the prediction on the input data. And these are the load models function. So whatever the code that you are going to use most of the time, that you can use, or you can declare inside the helper function. So that's why I have created another separate file, helper functions. Now let's go back to Flask web app.py. So inside this web app.py, first we will import all the Flask packages, and then we will import the helper function like sleep form, return prediction, sleep mode, scalar, sleep scalar, and then logging module. So again, let's create a basic logging module and then create a Flask application. So this is a constant part. So once you create a Flask application, you need to set a one secret key. So this secret key is used to debug the application. So app.config, we will create one secret key. Now we will create one endpoint. So app.route rule slash, that means this is a home page. And here you can notice we are using both the method get as well as post. Means a user visited this home page slash URL plus port number slash means home page. If a user visit that particular page, then user can get the data as well as user can post the data. So these are the two methods, means we can visit the HTML page and we can get the response as a HTML page, and we can fill that particular form on the HTML page and we can post that data to the server. So that can be triggered using this index function. So as soon as user visit this home location, first thing the code will do in the backend, it will trigger the index function because we have added the app.route decorator for this index function. So this index function will get triggered and then it will create a sleep form instance the way we have created using a helper function. So we will create one form object and then first we will validate on submit. So validate on submit means if someone has clicked on that button or not. So as you can see, once a visitor visit that particular page, then on that particular instance, this condition will become false because no one has filled and submitted that particular form. So this condition will become false. So let's go on to the next part. If this condition becomes false, then we are not going to execute this entire part. So if this condition is false, then we will directly render the template home.html and we will pass the form instance on the website to take the input from the user. So as soon as user enter the data on the form and click on submit, then form.validate on submit condition will become true. And now if the form is submitted, then inside the try block, we will extract the data. So again, extract the name data, age data, gender data, and store that data in session. So this session dictionary will be unique for all the user. So this particular instance can be used by multiple people at the same time. And that data for multiple users we can maintain using session variable. Okay. So we will store all the data and we will store that inside the session. So if the session dictionary is created, then we will redirect URL for prediction. So first take the input data from this particular part using this slash. Once we have all the input data, then we can redirect to prediction API. So that particular endpoint we have written here. So once the user submit the form, then user will be redirected to prediction part. So here you can see in app.route/prediction, user will be visited using this redirect option. So as soon as user visited this part, this prediction function will get triggered. And again, inside this prediction function, we will extract the data from the session variable. And then we will create another dictionary data, because this session will be maintained for the session level. Once you extract all the data from the session variable, we will store that inside the data dictionary. And then again, log the entire message and return the prediction. So we will call the inference pipeline, pass the sleep model, sleep scalar object and the data object that we extracted from the session variable. And then whatever the result you will get, you can log that particular message as a result, and then you can render the template thankyou.html. And inside this HTML template, you can pass the result parameter, which will display the final result on the HTML web page. And if anything goes wrong in this particular section, you can move on to the exception block. It will render the temple not found.html with 500 as a status code. Okay. So these are the two endpoints. First is home endpoint to collect the data from the user. Second endpoint will be used to display the collected data from the user as well as model prediction. And to run the application, you can again use app.run host equal to this number IP address 0.0.0, means we will accept all the requests from the client, port number and debug equal to true. So as I said, if you are using a config variable, then no need to maintain the no need to pass hard-coded value into your code. So in this case, what you can do, you can go to config.py. Here you can create a variable port and then one more variable IP, or let's say host, and then debug. So let's type debug equal to true as of now, and we are using host as 0,0,0,0. Port number will be 8050. Let me check which host port number. Port number you can take as per your convenience, but make sure that that port is available. So let's go to 8080. Okay, 8050. Okay, so now this port number is created. Now let's replace this config variable with the main file. So let's go to helper function.py and Flask web, and let's type the host equal to capital host. Host is a parameter. Capital host is the variable that we have created inside the config variable. Port and debug equal to capital debug. And here you can see we are getting error for that. So we can solve that error using from config import star. So you can see host, port and debug has been imported. Okay. Now let's run the Flask web app.py. But before that, you can see if you go to helper functions.py, there are few particular libraries which are not imported, like Flask WTF forms. So if you face such issue, you can import that particular library first and then you can run the code. But now I will show you how you can run the code even if you are getting a red line. Obviously you need to install the packages, but let's run the code first. We don't have to run helper function, we have to run Flask web app.py. It will trigger the helper functions automatically. So it says no module name Flask WTF. So let's install. So Flask WTF is installed. Let's type Python Flask web app.py. Now here you can see our server is running. So let's go to this link and we got error. Jinja to exception home.html. Okay. So this error is because we don't have home.html. Template not found. Okay. So I got this error because I made some spelling mistake. So I rectified that. Now let's run the code again. Python web Flask API web app.py, enter. And let's go to the page again. Now here we can see the entire front end. So using this particular front end, we can able to see the entire web application and the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything is working perfectly because this time we are combining the home.html with the base.html. So base.html is the file where we have mentioned all the CSS script, and home.html is basically the main form where we have declared the entire input data. So this is the main objective of the project. Now let's fill this particular form. First enter your full name, then enter your age. So I will enter some dummy data. Choose gender, enter your occupation in numeric. So let's say 8. Enter your sleep duration 6 hours, enter quality of 6, 3. Enter your physical activity 6, stress level 8, enter your BMI category 8, enter your heart rate 5, daily steps 1000, 45, 85, additional comment. Okay. Now this data validator will work if I don't pass any particular value. So let's say if I don't mention my name, and now if I click on submit button, see it is showing that please fill out this field. So in this particular form, we are using data validator. So it will validate whether a user inserting the correct data or not. Okay. So now as soon as I click on the submit button, this home page will go to the prediction page. Now here you can see thank you, here is the info you provided. Now this is the next page where we will display the user data in terms of numbers. And here you can see attention Dev, our model predicts insomnia. That means based on this particular parameter, I have a sleep disorder. Okay. So this is the entire web application. Now this particular web application can be accessible to the people who are in the same network. So currently the Wi-Fi network which I'm using, only that particular network we have deployed this model. So those who are in the same particular Wi-Fi network can access this entire web application. So it's called local deployment. In this case, my laptop will act as a server and other laptop will act as a client, and they can send the request to my machine using this URL. So they just have to type 192.168.1.57 is the IP address and then port number in the Google Chrome, and they can also see the entire web application running on their mobile as well as laptop. The only thing they need to have is a good internet connection, and the same, sorry, not internet is not required in this case. They just have to connect it on the same Wi-Fi network. Then they can access this entire web application using the local deployment. Now the next thing is to deploy this entire web application to the cloud service. But before that, we need to submit the entire code to the GitHub repository. And then we will move to the next part, which is related to the cloud deployment.